Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of Multiversal lore. So today I just wanted to quickly talk about the Dinobots and how they ended up becoming one of the most powerful, one of the most popular Autobot factions, and probably the most powerful out of all the factions. So, Grimlock, Slug, and Slag were first introduced in G1 when the Autobots ended up finding dinosaur remains within the volcano that they had crashed in, and they had decided to. So, Wheeljack and Ratchet had gotten the idea to create the 3 original Dinobots using those fossils. So they created Grimlock, who is in the middle. They ended up creating Slug, who is on the right behind him, and Sludge, who was on the left behind Grimlock. However, the experiment went awry for a few seconds, and Optimus didn't want the Dinobots becoming the most catastrophic out of them all, so he kind of had the Autobots seal them away because they were too destructive until the Autobots needed them the most and decided to release them and have them as part of the team. Then they would go on to get manipulated a little bit by Megatron and the Decepticons, and in response the Autobots had to create 2 more Dinobots. These 2 extra Dinobots would end up becoming Swoop and Snarl. Now, they helped the Autobots get the original 3 right here back on the Autobots side. And they would also end up becoming... They'd also end up becoming a huge part in the movie, although I don't think anybody really knew what happened to Snarl because he kind of just, disappeared during the events of the movie. So it was, only Grimlock, Sludge, Slug, and Swoop. Now, funny fact about Slug is that his name used to be originally Slag, but it was a curse word in England, so they had to change it to Slug. Now, the Dinobots, I don't think would exactly have an appearance until Transformers Animated, where they used to be just regular theme park animatronics, and they were recreated and rebuilt from those animatronics because Megatron was hoping that the Autobots would destroy them so that way he could create a new body for himself. And then they just kind of ended up causing mayhem until the Autobots were able to subdue them, and then they were being prepared to be destroyed until Prowl and Bulkhead kind of saved them both and decided to put them on, Dinobot Island. But the only members in that show were Grimlock, Swoop, and Slug. There was no mention to Snarl or Sludge. I would have loved to see them in Transformers Animated, but, nothing we could do about it now because the show's been over for, 17 years. And then they would end up reappearing in Transformers Fall of Cybertron as the original group, and this is kind of where the picture is from because this is their variants from Transformers Fall of Cybertron, where they were just regular Cybertronians that ended up becoming the experiments of Shockwave and the Insecticons. and they were given their dinosaur forms by Shockwave in the Insecticons, which is pretty interesting. Grimlock, however, would go on to kind of like sacrifice himself to try and take down Shockwave and his whole lab operation with the space bridge. But as it would turn out, he actually survived along with Shockwave, and they would go on to lead the Autobots that were on Cybertron. They would, that were still on Cybertron. They would help lead them against the, Shockwave and whatever crazy experiments he was working on until Shockwave was eventually able to get to Earth. Now, in the Michael Bay universe, they were shown to be ancient warriors, and instead of it being Grimlock, just like Grimlock, Slug, and Swoop and Snarl, it was just Grimlock, Slug, Strafed, and Scorn. And they were all portrayed as ancient warriors who were somehow captured by Lockdown, and then they were eventually freed by Optimus and the Autobots. And in a trial by combat, they would eventually end up joining the Autobots in the final battle against Galvatron and his reborn Decepticons, along with, Lockdown and his mercenaries. And they were said to also kind of be free after that, although they kind of just ended up in Cade's junkyard, where they were eventually either killed by Megatron and his Decepticons or the TRF. And they were in the Prime Wars trilogy, and I think, if I remember correctly, Sludge got killed by Rodimus Unicronus. And in the Prime Wars trilogy, I guess it's like supposed to be a sequel show to G1, although I never really understand how that kind of made any sense, because there are some continuity errors that, don't make it connect, that I feel like don't necessarily make it connect to the original G1 show. So if anything, I think the Prime Wars trilogy kind of takes place in like an alternate timeline, especially when you have a character like Primal showing up, being the guardian of the Requiem Blaster. But anyway, back to the Dinobots. Like, the Dinobots were somehow they ended up becoming a combiner team. I don't know necessarily how that happened. I don't remember how they explained that. If it was because they touched the enigma of combination and somehow managed to become a combiner team. But they were supposed to like become a combiner team in response to Predaking. So I'm not necessarily sure about that. Although they did get whooped by Predaking, kind of, and then later they ended up losing an entire member to Rodimus Unicronus. So there's that. There were also in Cyberverse as well, where Grimlock was actually more portrayed as intelligent. Now, he was also kind of portrayed as intelligent in Fall of Cybertron, but due to his torture by Shockwave and his torturous experiments by Shockwave, he ended up kind of like, his intelligence kind of ended up becoming halted. And I think they had ended up introducing the rest of the Dinobots, and I think, if I remember, Swoop was a female instead of male in Cyberverse or something like that. I know that one of the Dinobots ended up becoming a female, a female. Kind of like how they changed the gender of Captain Marvel for the sake of the Marvel multiverse. But they ended up also fusing, like combining to become Volcanicus. But that's really all I have on the Dinobots. Thank you for joining me here today. I'll see you all next time. Megatron the Comedian signing out.